This is the Advanced Selling Podcast.
I meditate. I light a candle I burn in the Northwest.
The aim of this podcast is to help business sales teams grow their business with modern strategies and philosophies. Now your hosts, Bill Caskey and Bryan Neal.
Take two.
Check.
Episode 10.
Mark.
25. Take one.
Mark. Welcome back to Same Shirt Day on the Advanced Selling Podcast. We are on video today, aren't we, Bill?
We are on video.
We are, and you have a nice sweater on. And
it has become obvious that we've taped this the same day.
We do. That's okay. We are here every week helping you. If you're a salesperson, you listen, we thank you. If you're a sales manager and you use it for your sales team, we thank you. You can find us on LinkedIn. A lot of you has found us on LinkedIn. Bryan Neal, Bill Caskey. Please connect with us there, and we are working hard to arrange trips outside the country. We have people working for us in Australia trying to get out and see those folks, and people in the UK, and you've got a couple shout-outs.
I've got a couple shout-outs from LinkedIn. I would assume it's Yvonne Sanchez from Australia.
That's good.
Or Ivan. It's either Ivan or Yvonne. I used to call Ivan De Jesus for so long until somebody reminded me it was Yvonne.
It's Yvonne. Yeah, I like that.
And Mark Frechette, from one of our loyal listeners, been with us for a while. He actually was responsible for this topic today, this new salespeople. How do you find them? How do you train them? And I know you've done a little bit of work up at a university north of here, working with their one of their professors. Yeah,
I speak every semester to the advanced selling class at Ball State University, and Ball State's got a very, very, very well-known, at least in the United States, sales program, and Dr. Raymond Avila, who is running that, distinguished marketing professor at Ball State.
You say distinguished because he's probably listening.
He's distinguished, and he's been titled distinguished, kind of like getting knighted. He's the
can I be distinguished?
I can't remember the person's name. It's the distinguished that funds it. Anyway, he's got a sales lab up there. He's got this desk setting where he puts kids in real live scenarios and audio and videotapes them, and they watch them back, and he can watch them live and critique. He's got sales contests. He's really tuned in to industry. Nothing against professors, but generally speaking, sometimes professors sort of live in the box of the university. He does just the opposite. He's probably outside the university more than he's inside of it. So, so I went to speak up there. Did I tell you about my introduction?
No.
So I go up there to talk, and there's not a lot. It's a classroom, so there's 15 kids in the class, and they're all seniors. They're really high level sales students for him. He does really good work with them. And the student, he assigns someone to be responsible for the introduction, and they get all this information from da-da-da. So he said to the gal introducing me, "Would you like to introduce our speaker today?" And she said, "Sure." She gets up there, and I'm kind of standing back. You get kind of proud when you hear all this stuff about you. She goes, "This is Bryan Neal from Caskey." And she's great. She's a wonderful girl. She's going to be really good. She's got a bunch of job offers. She's really smart. But you're kind of ready for that proud moment as a professional speaker. They go down your bio and they tell her about your kids and your family and everything you've done. And she goes, "This is Bryan Neal from Caskey."
And knowing you, you were probably planning on at least a minute so you can start to write your speech during that time.
Like everybody, stay seated. I know that was a lot. Yet. Stay seated. So, but she was great. She was really good. So,
that's good.
Yeah, this topic came up. We started talking about interviewing, and some of the students asked me questions. How do I stand out in an interview? And I don't believe that salespeople are very good at differentiating themselves in an interview. And I also think salespeople aren't good at differentiating themselves and letting the customer get to know them personally first. Yeah. We try to keep it kind of all even keel and maybe a guard up. And so we want to talk a little bit today about how do I bring that down? How do I let someone get to know me? What do they need to know? What do they not need to know? Whether it's a job interview or a first call.
Okay. And this sort of fits in with some of the words that we started last week. We were talking about some of our opinions on things. Last week we talked about competition. Bryan and I spoke a little bit about our philosophy of what competition means, and also we talked about money. I have one on here called The Story, and it really relates back to what you're talking about is what does another person need to know about us, whether they're considering hiring us as a salesperson or they're a prospect considering using us. What do they need to know? How much detail? What does the story sound like, look like? And so why don't we talk a little bit about that today?
That's good. Yeah. And we may have differing opinions on this, but so for starters, I always think with what am I trying to do when I very, very first sit down to talk with someone. And if you've listened to the podcast long enough, I think you know what our intent is when we get there. We want to create this environment where the communication is safe and open. And I find that a lot of people will adapt to however you set the tone for the conversation. So when it comes to that getting to know you part, I think I personally like to go first and like to just give a little bit of personal insight into just who I am. And for me, that's how it usually sounds. Where if I've not met you, I say, would it be okay if I gave you 90 seconds just on who I am, where I came from, a little bit about our firm, and maybe you
90
do the
minutes,
same?
did you say?
90 seconds.
90 seconds.
Yeah, I can fly through it pretty quickly these days. Most people will say, that would be great, because no one usually wants to go first. Then I personally start with a little bit of personal stuff. I've got 4 little kids, 8, 6, 5, and 3. I'm married. My wife, Jen's from Fort Wayne. I grew up in Evansville, started my career at Procter & Gamble. I love what I do. I don't look at it as work. I feel very fortunate. I think it's rare for a lot of people. And I throw in that I'm a Big Ten football official. And just that little, was that 90 seconds?
No, it was 30 seconds.
That little bitty snippet right there tells you so much about who I am. It also starts to define our conversation. So when I shut up, and then I can talk a little bit about our firm, and then when it's your turn, you're probably going to do something similar to what I just did.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to get to know you, and we've started in this new place.
Yeah. And after, we talk a lot about how long it takes to bond with people. Oh, my gosh, it takes 6 months before you really get to know your buyer. No, it actually doesn't.
No.
If you're willing to be vulnerable and go first and say, look, let me tell you about the non-business me.
Yep.
And then let me tell you a little bit about the business me. And before you know it, you do that, he or she does that, and you know each other pretty well in a couple minutes.
Yeah. And it's not, and this is not, I talked to this to the group at Ball State. I said, one of the number one things, I did this framework of, I said, okay, what do I wish someone would have told me in 1991 when I was sitting in sales class right before I graduated college? And what have I learned since then? I wish I would have learned then. One of the things was be your authentic self, just be who you are. I think some people come in with this posturing mask on, and then the rapport part, the bonding, becomes very fake.
Yeah.
Oh, Bill, I see you're a golfer. How you doing today? Yeah. And I'm not a golfer, and then as soon as I say you're a golfer and you got golf stuff over, you're like, well, no doubt.
They can tell.
They can tell real fast. So be who you are. Be real.
Yeah, I think that hasn't been, it's been drummed into our head to, you are there to get a job.
Yes.
You are there to get a sale.
Yes.
So therefore, do everything that it takes to get a sale or get a job. And then you're not acting from your original self. You're acting as a pawn in a chess game. You're just trying to manipulate the other side. And, and yet the interesting things, the paradox, P-A-R-A-D-O-X.
Thank you.
Paradox.
Not D-O-C-K-S.
Not
D-O-C-K-S. A pair of docks that I would have at my lake house. No. A pair of docks.
But the paradox is that that when you do that, you gain so much traction in a relationship, and it really does become a relationship, not just this thing that we call a relationship that usually isn't in the sales buyer-seller process.
Right. It's very, very good. What about when I come in and do that, and then the other person is still a little guarded? Any ideas for handling that? Because some people don't like to go to that personal stuff, and they get a little taken aback by it. I don't find that to be the case very often, but it could happen. Especially if you're calling on people that are engineers.
That's right. See, who we call on are CEOs and sales VPs.
Usually much more open to that. But I think that's one thing you've got to consider when you're thinking about opening up. You got to consider who's on the other side of the desk.
I guess the question there is, does them knowing you at a deeper level help further their understanding of you, and does it help the relationship, or at least the first call, whether they respond or not? Because I think, because then you start thinking, well, I said that, and he didn't respond, so what did I do to tick him off? And that's not it.
That's not it, right.
You can't expect that. But I do like the idea of telling a little bit about your history. I think why you're in the business, especially you sales professionals who maybe are fairly new in the business, or it really doesn't matter. I think your customers should know why this business is interesting to you. You've been in it for 20 years. Why do you stay in the business? Do you know what, Mr. Prospect? I love what I do. This market is constantly changing. I love serving people. Whatever it is, I think that's important. And also, I think it's important that you talk about why are you with this company that you're with. So you're in the business generally in the industry because of a certain thing, but why are you with Caskey? Why are you with IBM or Microsoft? Because there has to be something that's keeping you there. And as long as it doesn't sound real phony, and as long as it's a real thing, like I'm afraid of being unemployed.
I really needed the job.
No, but what, and even if you need to expose some warts of what, we're not perfect. We at IBM are not perfect, but it's the best place I've ever worked. I love my manager. We do good work, and I'm always trying to improve things. Are we perfect? No, but but I think industry, company, why you're still there, and a little bit about you is probably a minute or two, and that's probably enough.
Yeah, and I love what you said. That's really, really good to say, why do you do what you do? Why was I drawn to this in the first place? Coming out of college, why was I drawn to this company? whether it's the people or the product or the market or anything. And I love the idea. I always call this in training, I call this the yin and yang of our language, that our language always needs to be balanced with plus and minus. If it's all too rosy, people get really skeptical quickly. So I love what you said in there about, we're really darn good at things, but occasionally, we fall down. What I loved about them the most is they admitted that they fell down. When they fell down, they got a process for picking back up, and that really drew me to them. That's a really strong statement to make, and most salespeople are afraid to say that.
97. And if the marketing department ever heard you say we ever fell down, they would destroy you.
That's right.
But the fact is that realism sells, authenticism sells, being genuine. And the opposite of that is disingenuous, where if everything's perfect, it's too good to be true, and prospects know that.
It's very good.
So that might be some things to work on over the next week or so, is just telling your story, understanding what it is. Just write it out like you're writing a letter to someone, and look at the key parts, and that you can become a 30-second to a minute story pretty easily.
Yeah, very, very good. You can find us again on LinkedIn. Go to the advancedsellingpodcast.com or advancedsellingpodcast.com. Leave a question for us, and please stay in touch.
Don't forget, for you iPhone users, we have an iPhone app,
we
Advanced
do.
Selling Podcast. You can go to your app store and pick that up, and occasionally we have things that we run through the channel, run through the transom, as it were. As it were?
It's two big words.
As it were. See you later. Next
Bye.
time. Bye.